my business. You be all in your feelings. I been all in them trenches. I been all in my bag.
Hey guys, welcome to Ace Podcast Nation. I'm Sai, and this is the home of our wrestling series, Keepin It Real with Andrew Thompson. This is Series 2, Episode 2. And as usual, you can watch this show at youtube.com/Ace Podcast Nation, or you can download the audio versions at all the different podcast platforms. But we are now part of the Sports Social Podcast Network, the UK's first dedicated sports network. So please do check them out. Every single series and channel and interview, everything we produce at Ace Podcast Nation will be found there with its own little website in there and team and whatnot. So do have a look. It's a fantastic website full of everything, full of all sorts of sports podcasts. But today is a very special edition of Keeping It Real. We were hoping that Andrew would join us as usual, but for anyone who follows wrestling, it has been a very busy couple of weeks. Insane, I would say. And we had a guest booked, and the guest is here, but Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid, is far too busy, and I don't blame him whatsoever. However, our guest may have a different point of view, but we'll see now. But joining me is a man whose writing is phenomenal. I really enjoy his feature writing. Hasn't done as much of that in recent times, but what he has done is produce one of the best wrestling podcasts out there alongside Jeremy Lambert, the legend. Hello, Jeremy. But the guest is none other than the Distractions, Joe Hulbert. How are you, mate? It's been a while.
Too long, man. I'm happy to be here, but as you kind of hinted at, it's slightly bittersweet, right? As you know, I'm here to confront the great Andrew Thompson, who has been ducking me for some time now. I must say, the evidence is stacking up, and this may be the biggest yet. Right? this is. I come here to his home, and he banishes. It's not a great sign, but I'm happy to be here. Always happy to talk wrestling, and as I said to you before we started recording here, like 2 years. I don't think either of us, if we'd have predicted where those 2 years would take us, we're ever going to get quite the scope of it. But there you go.
It's been mental, mate. And it's funny because, like I said to you earlier today, just talking about the Distraction and how well it's doing, and how I'd be so pleased for you guys because I really like Jeremy. I get on really well with you. I like you. And the guys which you've also got alongside you two, they seem like really cool sound guys as well. I don't know them, but they seem sound. Mm-hmm. And I was so happy for you. And then I had a notification from YouTube myself saying that my channel had hit 500,000 views today. And I was like, wow, that's really mental to me, because it's just something which started and when you came on before, it was before I kind of had all these separate series and days and co-hosts and live shows and all that. It was just a channel which was literally there. I just wanted to talk to interesting people who had similar interests to me to help my own sort of mental health, and it worked. But it kind of grew and developed into this different thing. And I think, is that similar to the Distraction in the way that you kind of started as just a thing with you and Jeremy, just talking wrestling, and it's kind of grown into this mad thing?
I think that's a theme generally across these shows that kind of live on and get healthier, right, and grow, is they very seldom stick to the original format. So yes. The Distraction, and to anyone that's ever listened to The Distraction, they're about to laugh when I explain this, but it's the truth. That show was supposed to be a 45-minute weekly podcast in which we stick to topics for 5 minutes. And I mean, this week we're at about 50 minutes with nothing to talk about, so I just began to play Matt Hardy's theme into my microphone. So, now we do. I mean, this yesterday, last night or this morning for us Brits, I did a 4-hour Patreon stream. It's bonkers, dude. I mean, it's lost its way completely. But as you said, we have this kind of wider universe, and it is literally, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, it's watching your audience and listening to them and just trying your best to kind of evolve it and grow it without losing sight of the original core principles, even if it's in a different format. The show was always going to just be two dudes talking wrestling. I just think we quickly realised that trying to license it as 5-minute blocks, that ain't our personality. I mean, before we went live here, you and I were already going off in all different directions. That's just the way it should be, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I was just telling you about a couple of the interviews which I've done recently, with Demetrius Johnson and Arjan Bula, who are, the MMA guys. I was supposed to do an MMA interview, and with Demetrius Johnson, we were on about talking about dirt biking. with Arjan Bula, we did the majority of the 15 minutes talking about wrestling. He was like really passionate about that. And then it just goes where it goes, and that's kind of reflective of pretty much every show I do, even the ones which have got like set topics like the football or whatever. They just go where they go. And like you said about Andrew, like obviously we are hoping Andrew would join us, and hopefully he might pop in. We'll see how it goes. But I mean, it reminded me when you said he's just vanished. The lights went out. He's done a Bray Wyatt, and the lights have gone out, which kind of takes me into this thing whereby when I spoke to you last, which like on camera, which was like 2 years ago, was kind of when the Fiend and Bray Wyatt and where he was going through a change in character, and like without going too much into Bray Wyatt and all the missed opportunities, one of my biggest things whenever I talk to people about Bray Wyatt is the man did a feud with The Undertaker at WrestleMania. The Undertaker didn't turn up until WrestleMania. And if you go back and watch like the vignettes and the promos he did, all stellar. But the Raw before Mania, he did this promo in the ring on his own. Taker didn't turn up. Was so good, so captivating. He carried this whole feud, made people interested, and then just came along and did the job clean. And it was like, that was like such a kick in the face. And like even you go back to the John Cena feud, that was really interesting. It was really good. They did some quite creative stuff in it, and he just lost clean. He did always seem to lose those big matches, and then when the Fiend come along, it was like, right, they finally seem to get it now. They've given him, he's doing something really creative, and they kind of just, Goldberg was I think the start of the decline. But even before that, like the Hell in the Cell match, and then when they released him, and then they released Braun and then him, or the other way around, I forget. But like we were just talking then, like they're the two most WWE superstars that you could probably get. Like Bray Wyatt is one of the best talkers around, insanely creative. Had this gimmick which meant he's got so many followers in terms of people who enjoy his content, his Easter eggs, and like you go on YouTube and search Bray Wyatt Easter eggs, there's hundreds of videos of people ploughing through these 2-minute, 3-minute segments of Firefly Funhouses looking for like hints and Easter eggs. Yet somehow he's not up to the WWE. Like they didn't think he was worth the money, which is insane to me. And Braun Strowman is like a working 7-footer, ripped as hell, can talk, can go in relatively well in the ring, not for the WWE. And I think that's a problem for me, because I just think people like Adam Cole, why would you re-sign there, honestly? But yeah, sorry mate, I went off on a bit of a...
No, you're good. I think it's interesting. I think those two cases are separate in ways that have been hinted at but not outwardly said. You know, like reading what Sean had on Bray, it seems to me, my kind of just outlaw side look at it is that after WrestleMania, Bray kind of was like, I'm only going to come back and do this stuff if I'm confident they're not going to kill me again, which is 100% what he should have done. Because
should have done that from the start.
I have stressed this 1,000,001 times. Like, people don't get how bonkers that was at WrestleMania. I mean, no one thought he was losing that match, including Randy. Like he was never supposed to lose that match, and then they did the stuff.
But that was the culmination of everything. Was right. Him winning that match, getting the win back from all that time ago, and it just made no sense. And then you think, well, maybe they're going to do this big angle with Alexa, and there's going to be some sort of payoff. And it did look like they might go back to the Randy Orton thing through Alexa Bliss. And then they just didn't. And look, for me, why wouldn't he be protective over that gimmick? Right. Something that he's created himself, set the groundwork in years ago with that Ghost Stories video. Like, even when he did that Firefly Funhouse the day after Mania, it almost, when you watch it back, it almost looks like he's predicting leaving the WWE. And I don't think that necessarily was the case. I think he probably thought he was going to go to SmackDown and do something else. But, like, guy's clever, guy's talented. I'm sure he'll do well in whatever he does, whether that's wrestling or not. I've seen a lot of people say go to Impact. Look, I actually do quite enjoy Impact, and I think he'd be good on Impact. But I also saw that Impact got like what is the equivalent of a 0 rating on the TV this week, which makes me sad for the workers because there's some really talented people. But
it's hard. I have this same problem where, and I know you probably see I have a lot of fun with it on Twitter, but like there are some wrestlers, and yesterday there was all this news, and I think a lot of it was completely fabricated. But you know, you had like Braun, Bray, and Buddy were all linked to Impact, right? And everyone is happy to tweet, well, they'd be good in Impact, but it's like, I don't know, man. Like, as you just said, like, it's great in theory, but then once they're there for a month and they just become part of the furniture, everyone inevitably feels the same, and they don't feel like big stars because of the way it's produced, the way that it feels, and frankly, the facts. We can't pretend it's a big hit. It isn't, right?
No.
So and that's not a knock on them. It's the same for, I think Ring of Honor is a great product. No one's watching it. You know, like
no one's watched it since like Adam Cole and the Elite left. Let's be honest. Right. It's just, and they brought a lot of fans in. Let's be honest. Like people watched for that, whether it was through BTE or whether it was through just New Japan or whatever it may be. It's tricky, and I mean, and I think, and I know people will probably hate me saying this, and he's almost the guy that shouldn't be named, but like. People like Marty Scurll, obviously we all understand why he's not there, but that doesn't change the fact that when he was at Ring of Honor, he was a draw, he was doing big things for the company, and by all accounts it seems like he was doing a pretty good job behind the scenes. So yes, we understand why he's not there, of course we do, but it doesn't change the fact that that's going to hurt Ring of Honor. And I'm so behind the Ring of Honor. I didn't even know that like Jonathan Gresham was getting quite a big push, and I think he's got a stable and stuff. I really like Jonathan Gresham, and that sounds awesome to me. But I haven't got the time. Like we talked about that before. Like there's wrestling on every single day. I wish I could watch Ring of Honor. I just don't have the time to watch it. Where do you think Bray Wyatt is going to go? Where do you think he should go? And then where do you think he will go?
My instincts have always been AEW because I just think as much as people are quick to do the thing about he doesn't fit and all that good stuff, I think they're very open-minded stylistically. Yeah. And I think a Bray Wyatt that's in the vein of, I'm sure he's going to do a new version of himself, but I think one that's more reminiscent of the original, cult-style figure, I think could easily fit in AEW. Because the thing, I mean, here's the deal, like, Andrade's been there for 3 months and he's wrestled one match. Like, if you're not a fan of Bray in ring, which I think is the concern that people have about him in AEW, he would legitimately probably wrestle like 5 times a year. I don't think he would be wrestling every week. They'd have too big of a roster for that anyway. So that's always been my guess, but I don't know. It was interesting that Meltzer kind of said that and then got very, very
backtracked real quick, didn't he?
Which makes you wonder who told him otherwise, right? But that was always my guess. What about you?
I think AEW, and I think because there's several options there, like he could come in and do a Fiend-like gimmick, something different. He could go back to the kind of the cult leader thing, like similar to that, and I think that works as a babyface or a heel. I always liked, and he only did it for a short stint, I always liked the kind of the down with the machine sort of anti-hero thing. I thought there was a missed opportunity when he was over doing that because the fans were all singing he's got the whole world in his hands and down with the machine. I felt like there was always an opportunity to do like an anti-hero versus the kind of the Vince McMahon or the Shane McMahon doesn't want someone like him as a champion or as the face of the brand and kind of holding him down. Or I felt like there was always that kind of story with him. But ultimately, I just think if he goes somewhere which gives him creative freedom and he's booked right, that'll work. But also, one of his most successful parts was when he was a cult leader and he had 4 people in his stable and he did, like, whatever feud he was in, they would wrestle Strowman or Harper or Rowan and they'd only wrestle Bray further down. And he don't, like you say, he'd only wrestle now and again. He wouldn't wrestle on TV. He'd only wrestle at the pay-per-view. And I think there's ways around that, absolutely. What about, I've seen this a lot, and I don't really know how I feel about it a lot. I've seen a lot of people saying he should come in, like once they finish this kind of the Hangman story, and the Hangman and Dark Order kind of come together again. I've seen a lot of people saying that if you want to give the Dark Order like a heel turn and make them more the cult that they were when they were with Brody Lee and stuff, do you have Bray come in and kind of slowly get in their ear and turn them against Adam Page? I don't know how I feel about it, but if anybody is going to take over as the Dark Order's leader, I do think he's the only person who could and should, but I still don't know whether I think that should be the case.
Yeah, I'm torn on that because I agree with you that while everyone dismisses a new leader for obvious reasons, like we're aware that Bray and Brody were like the best friends, right? Like it's not like it's a guy that doesn't have a link. Now, here's the thing I will say. I don't know if I would do it. It's difficult because that's definitely the best story. Him trying, kind of being the manipulative villain. But I also think there's something to Bray just picking up the mantle and then being the team they are now as babyface is just with a different edge. Because the thing about the Dark Order is they have become kind of, especially now that the Elite are heels, they're kind of like the heart and soul of the promotion in a weird way. And it sounds crazy, right? Like, who would have ever thought we'd end up there? But I think, with everything that happened, I think that's kind of the case. So you'd have to really walk a fine line with it. I think one of the big challenges for AEW is they're very babyface heavy right now, right? So on the babyface side, you got Hangman, Punk, Darby, Moxley. Like, you got a lineup there. One of their biggest challenges will be, and whether it's the Dark Order, whether it's one of those guys I just named, turning acts that people love without killing their kind of what they stand for. WWE has become so bad at just turning guys on a dime. Like real heroes that just turn. And I mean, we talk about Becky Lynch at some point, I'm sure. What do these characters stand for? Ultimately nothing. Anyone could turn. It means nothing. AEW needs to be careful with that. I think a Moxley's starting to lean a certain way, which is something. But Dark Order's one where I would think about it, but I'd be very reluctant to turn them, so to speak, just because, I don't know, man, people really resonate with those guys, right? It's hard. It's difficult to do. It'll be interesting to see, for sure.
Yeah, it is difficult, and I think that is one of the things which AEW does well is they kind of leave the audience to choose who they want to cheer for, who they want to boo for, which is good. But then when you do want to tell a story of so and so is the heel, that can be problematic. And I think you can see that even with the Elite, they're doing their very best to be heels, but they're still getting cheered. Right. To a certain degree, because because the Bullet Club have always been like that kind of cool heels which people cheer, and I think that is just part and parcel of it. It's certainly gonna be interesting, mate. Like, I think Braun Strowman probably goes to Impact. That seems, I wouldn't be surprised if Braun Strowman signed back with WWE either. But
yeah, me too. Like that's actually. Guns to my head, that's still probably where I go.
I don't think Bray will though. I feel like he feels like, and I'm guessing, obviously, I've got no way of knowing. I feel like he feels like let down by the way unless he asked for his release, of course. But like from the outside looking in, it looks like a bit like they screwed him over. Like, but he's same as Strowman, I suppose. Like, he's just not long signed like this massive deal, and then they've binned him off.
I think he was. So this is the thing, right? I think Bray was a case of a guy that had enough of their creative, and then being like, "Okay, fine, you don't want to play ball, we're going to cut you." Okay, but I think with Braun, and this is just from watching how he has handled it publicly, I think he was caught way off guard. Like, I think he genuinely believed he was going to work there for life.
Yeah, well,
which makes me think, and this is a little bit cynical, but it's my honest opinion. I think they looked at their talent roster and they looked at the most expensive guys and they said, Braun is probably a guy that AEW is not going to sign. And he's a guy that, frankly, is kind of naive to wrestling, right? He thought he was going to work there forever. Let's make an example. And I know people hate when you say stuff like, but let's be honest, they are that cold. They do think that way.
They don't give two shits about any of them.
And who would you say, I guess what my point is, if Kevin Owens is making 7 figures and so is Braun Strowman, well, who's more valuable at AEW, right? And
it's like, Jesus Christ. Can you imagine?
Exactly, right?
Kevin Steen turning up on Dynamite. Oof.
Oh, man. If I imagine too much, I'll get fired up on here.
I know, Jesus Christ. That gets your blood boiling a bit. Woo!
But that was always my read on it. Braun's...
Yeah.
bless Braun. I hope it works out for him because I know that he's said some dumb stuff, but like he seems like a guy that struggles an awful lot, and I do feel for him. You know, it's not ideal.
Don't think, like I don't even now. I feel like if he got a chance to go and work in AEW or Impact or wherever as part of Bray Wyatt's new stable, I think he would do that because they do seem quite close. And I would not be against that. I think that would be a great role for him if he was going to go into AEW. That's almost the only way I could see him being in it, is if he was like Bray's muscle. But I also, like you say, he seemed like a WWE lifer. He said a lot of dumb shit about workers and jobs and all sorts of stuff. So like, you could almost see him not going anywhere else. Like if he doesn't, if he doesn't go back to WWE, maybe he won't do wrestling. Maybe he'll do something else. And that's what some people forget as well. Is I think some of these guys have got outside interests. Like you look at Tyler Breeze and people like this. They've got a load of business outside of wrestling. And maybe when you've wrestled for what is, like it or not, the biggest wrestling company in the world, maybe you don't want to go back to the slog of doing the indies and stuff. And I'm not by any means diminishing those events.
It's different. No, you're right.
Companies.
Yeah, it's different.
But you get used to doing things a certain way. It's the same with any job, isn't it? Once you get used to stuff, it's difficult to then go, oh, I'm just going to move on and do it somewhere else.
Yeah, especially if we're looking at an idea where a Bray and a Braun go to an Impact and try and have a big program, like it would be very hard for them two dudes to not realize how minor that is to what they just did. They were main event in SummerSlam a year ago. You know, I mean, that sounds insane, but it's the truth. And no, I think you're absolutely right. And that's one thing a lot of people miss. When these guys get cut, everyone does the deal where they go, AEW doesn't need them. And it's like, well, that's easy for us to say. But AEW's touring the country and on national television on TNT. It's like, I don't think these guys, I don't think they're going to sit there and say, Impact needs me more. You know, like.
That's it. No, do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's a weird one. And of course, it's been a mental couple of months, really. Like, starting almost with Bray being released. Then, obviously, CM Punk came back, mate. How did you feel watching him for the first time make his entrance on AEW Rampage?
I've got a lot of stuff wrong since I started talking about wrestling. My read on Punk before it was before Sean got the scoop was, 7 years, that terrible Sean Fox. He did some UFC stuff. Does anyone care? I can tell you they cared. They really, really cared. And I have to say that's one of the most, and I'm not even a huge CM Punk guy. I'm not saying he wasn't great. My fandom didn't overlap with his run. That makes sense. So I didn't appreciate it. But him coming out in Chicago is one of the best moments as a fan that I've seen, even not being a big, just because it was about as human and real as wrestling gets, right? It was truly cathartic for those people. You could see it was like a release. It was powerful stuff, man, right? It was
Didn't expect to see him crowd surfing, do you? Do you know what I mean? He doesn't seem like that guy.
No.
But I think CM Punk's a very complex character. Like, I think he's a complex guy. I'm pleased he's back in wrestling because I think it would have been a real shame, whether you're a fan of his work or not. There's no denying that he's very good at what he did when it comes to wrestling, and it would have been a shame if his wrestling career had ended with the way it did, like a Royal Rumble mid-elimination and then never coming back, and then a quick stint on backstage. Like, that would have been a shame if that was the end, and I'm kind of glad that he can go and have this run. And like, look, wrestling Twitter, I'm lucky because I'm very much kind of on the outskirts of it, because I do a wrestling show, but I also do football and MMA and all these different things. So I'm not like in wrestling Twitter day in, day out. So I see it, but I'm not in it. And I see the people just going back and forth, and I just think, it's not fucking healthy, mate, to be like that angry and defensive over stuff. And you've got, like, as soon as there's a post from anyone, Sean or Meltzer or the WWE or AEW about CM Punk or whatever like that, there's people in there, oh, he's overrated, rubbish, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as someone else replies and said, well, did you not see that pop, or blah, 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 it's like, oh, well, Brock Lesnar got a bigger pop. Yeah, but that's because there was 3 times as many people in that arena. And but it's just like this bitter thing. And I as someone on the outside, I don't get it. And I feel I feel sorry for those people because I just think I look at how many tweets they've done that day. Like they've been on Twitter all day, just go arguing with people about,
Right.
oh no, this is better or this is better, and it's normally AEW and WWE, and it's normally back and forth, and I just don't get it, mate, at all. And I'm sure you're more in it and you see more of it than I do. I can't imagine being that aggressive and defensive.
So here's where I'm at with this. So I think I've kind of defeated Twitter over the last 6 months, where I've figured out you just have to avoid people that annoy you, right? Now, so for you, it's easy because, as you said, you're on the outskirts. Like I'm pretty deep in because the amount of wrestling content I'm doing at this point is legitimately unhealthy. So I know all of the narratives and I hear it, I'll read it all, and people tell me if I don't get it. That's the worst part, by the way. When you go on Twitter, people send you stuff you had no intention of seeing.
They update you.
Yeah, and so here's the thing with my fandom right now. If you just had to allocate where I'm at, it's like I'm clearly an AEW fan right now, right? But what you'll not see me do is like if someone says they think Dynamite sucked, I'll just be like, okay, man.
Yeah.
Like, the weirdest part to me is the defense is weird, right? On both sides. Now, I have to be honest with you, I experience a lot more. And you probably have noticed if you follow me on Twitter. I don't retweet WWE much at all, but if I tweet anything, people assume that I am legitimately like a paid Tony Khan guy. And it's like, obviously that's hilarious because just for many, many reasons. But I think there's a lot of weird elements to the WWE defense because it appears to me that there's like you said the word bitter, and I think there's truth to it. Like, when the Friday morning before First Dance, they were doing the deal about, wouldn't it be funny if Punk didn't show up tonight? And it's like, it really feels like you guys watching a wrestling show that actively slacks you across the face every week is like damaged to you. It's like, it wouldn't be funny. Oh, we want wrestling fans to like wrestling, But before that's my honest opinion. But I will say that I've also experienced the other side where I said, Dynamite wasn't that good this week, and people think that I'm a WWE guy. And it's like there's lunatics on both sides.
I thought Dynamite, this last Dynamite Wednesday, the follow up to Punk being out, I didn't think it was very good.
I agree.
It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't what I would have done. They had so much momentum.
Agree.
I was expecting something like, and they put on some incredible Dynamites. That's what I was expecting. Incredible matches. And I was expecting big angles, and they kind of just moved everything along a little bit, but they didn't follow up on it. And I saw Raj Giri post something yesterday. He said this happy-go-lucky CM Punk is going to get old really quick, and I think that is something they need to be careful of because they will have had new viewers come in now since last Friday. They're going to have more people watching. Even if those people are only popping in to check it out or they're watching YouTube clips or whatever it is. And what they don't want is those people to come in and then go straight back out because for whatever reason. And I just felt like there was an opportunity to really... Oh, shit, just stood on my hairdryer. See? You wouldn't get that on the distraction, would you? A hairdryer.
We get worse, don't worry.
Hairdryer going off. As long as it doesn't catch fire, that's the main thing, I guess. It's a weird one though, isn't it? Because I felt like it wasn't very good, and then I was like, shall I tweet that? And I was like, you know what? I can't be bothered because I just thought if I tweet that and I like hashtag AEW or hashtag whatever Dynamite, someone will be like, oh, what are you on about? WWE Mark or whatever, and it's like, it's not that. Like, look, I'm one of the biggest critics of WWE there is. I'm legitimately upset with what they're doing, what it seems like they're going to do to NXT, because like NXT to me 2 years ago injected adrenaline straight into my heart in terms of my love of professional wrestling again. So before AEW came around, which has done a similar thing, those NXT takeovers back in the day, before it was on TV, and when it was just the network and then takeovers, they were special. And not only were they special events, but they never disappointed. Every match was always good. It was, you always came out with that on such a high. And to see that being basically scrapped and torn up makes me sad. And I do think, like, I wonder, I'd love to get an interview or an off-the-record conversation with Triple H. I would love it. Where he would just be honest.
It's interesting, right? So the thing with that stuff is, I find it, like, just in conversation sense, I find it somewhat funny that Triple H has managed to be and get in this position, because you would never have guessed, right? Like, the idea that Triple H, he was so clearly framed as the heir to the throne, and it now feels like they're just taking the piss out of him. But this is where I struggle with it. So I think it's objectively true that he could have done a better job developing homegrown guys. Here's the problem, though, with that as a Vince defense. Man, did he give them a lot of can't miss stars that they managed to miss on. Yes. Like Andrade, Aleister Black, even Shinsuke. And there's some guys where if you say this, and this goes back to Twitter. So if I tweeted now, okay, if I tweeted, man, WWE really missed out on Bobby Roode, someone would be like, what do you want? You know? And here's what I think the point of these conversations are. I'm not saying Bobby Roode should have main event WrestleMania. I'm saying, why did he come up as a babyface and you got nothing out of him after a year of NXT champ? They're the little one, and they built up. And then what happened was, from what I can gather, one day Vince said, what's wrong with our talent pool? And the people around him blamed Triple H. And he's like, no, you've run them all off, whether they're homegrown or not. Triple H give you a lot of guys. Samoa Joe's another one who they did stuff with, but they could have always done more. And they just messed it up. And now they find themselves in a position where, frankly, with each monthly cut, that roster is there was once a time where their roster was like a million miles ahead of second, right? It was clearly the best roster in wrestling. I don't know if they're not still number one. I'd have to really sit down and think about it. But it's closer now, right? Like, AEW's roster's very good too. So it's puzzling. I do feel for Triple H in that sense. It feels like he's getting blamed for saying that it's not his fault to me.
18 months ago, I did say WWE had the best roster they had ever had, ever. Because you could fill up Raw, SmackDown, and NXT with a show and talent and book these amazing cards and still have guys left over. And like, now I look at that NXT roster. If you take out Samoa Joe, you take out, like, and I'm not sure, like, I like Kyle O'Reilly. Not sure about this gimmick that he's doing at the moment. I like some of the guys who are in there, and Roderick Strong I like. But like, even they brought in Diamond Mine, ripped the legs straight out of it by releasing one of the guys. They released, like, to me, they're trying to scramble in to sign Adam Cole, and I hate to think how much money they've thrown at him over the last couple of weeks. I'm telling you, I would be very surprised if they didn't offer him well over $1 million, just because they know he's going to go to AEW and he's going to go straight up the top, because he's got the relationship with Adam Page and he's got the relationship with the Elite. He's got the relationship with Kenny Omega. There's so much ready-made stuff at the top of that card for him. Or they could go with a CM Punk or someone like that, new. They know, but they've realised too late. And they're going to be throwing all sorts of money at him. But the time to bring him up was before they split up Undisputed Era, when he dropped the title the first time. And they should have gone to SmackDown as a group. I think it was just after they did the Invasion angle, and they were so when they turned up during that NXT Invasion, it was like people were so happy to see them as a group on the roster, and it's just but then really, if they'd gone, would they have dropped the ball even with them? I'm
sure they would, right?
So many can't miss acts, not just good talents like Bobby Roode, like you're talking top level, cannot miss acts that they have just not been able to book logically. Like Bobby Roode should have been just a mid card, upper main event talent who now and again could go into like a multi-man WWE title match. But then Andrade, even Karrion Kross, now they put him up without his entrance and without Scarlett Bordeaux, which I was very surprised at, because like, you look at Scarlett and you think, well, Vince is going to love her. He's going to love the theatrics of their entrance together. And they booked him to lose. They booked him without his entrance, without his wife.
Yeah, it feels like when I said earlier they're kind of poking fun at Triple H, it feels like poor Karrion Kross is the one wearing those shots, right? Adam
There's
Cole
so much, isn't there? There's so many examples. It's difficult.
Oh, yeah. And then what happens is people teach to let it play out, and then by the time it plays out, they've forgotten.
Yeah. But that's what it is, isn't it?
Adam Cole is interesting because I think we should all not lose sight of how unique a position he's in. So when an Andrade says, I want out.
He's got him by the balls, mate, I think. Absolutely.
He's got the industry like that right now. Andrade is interesting. Like him and Malachi Black are guys that you look at and say, okay, they were on the main roster, they stalled, they eventually left for different reasons, and then AEW gets them. That's a common story, right? Guy goes up, it doesn't work out, they leave. Adam Cole is a guy who has been the top guy in NXT for 3 years, maybe more. I forget. Has never done a main roster run. So his choice is either, do I gamble? This is the funniest part about this. Do I stay with the company I'm already in and gamble by trying to live my dream as a WrestleMania main event, or do the safe bet of leaving?
And go to my wife or my best friends.
Right. How crazy is it? We're at a point where after 3 years in their development or their third brand, the safe bet is leaving.
It's madness, mate.
We all agree that, frankly, and this is not a knock on him, it's for what we just said, none of us have any faith in him doing well on Raw or SmackDown. Not because of him.
Yeah.
Because now he's in control of that show. And it's such a shame, but it is what it is.
When he had Undisputed Era with him, he was like so cannot miss to me because he's such a good talker. And even though he's small, he's got the WWE good looks. He looks good on camera and he can work. And like the one thing with him, and this is what I think sometimes is lost on people, and people forget. So when you were a kid, if you have got dreams and stuff like that, like his dream, and he said it multiple times, was to main event WrestleMania. His dream is to be a WWE superstar. And whilst I get that people assume he's going to AEW, until he does, I think, until he signs a contract, I think there's always going to be a bit of him pulling towards WWE because of that reason. And I think sometimes people underestimate the strength of that. Like, if something's your lifelong dream, and someone is saying to you, Joe, you know that lifelong dream you've had since you were like 10 years old? Well, here's a contract, and I'm going to pay you $1 million to do it now. Do you know, that's hard, mate. Like, it's a weird one, mate, because I don't think he's guaranteed to go to AEW.
I agree.
Most likely. But I would not be surprised if he turned up on Raw or SmackDown in a big angle. But then that big angle will probably be dropped in 3 weeks. He'll be in the mid-card and...
Right, so my initial reaction to the news was I just assumed he was going to stay for the reason that you just laid out. And here's the thing to go with that. If he tries to do the main event WrestleMania thing and it doesn't work, let's be honest, AEW will always be there for Adam Cole. Like, even if they bury him 6 foot under, AEW will bring him back out of that. They've done it with guys that are in a much worse position than he would ever.
Much less talented than him as well.
Right. So it'll always be this. And my initial reaction was, he'll stay. You know. However, it must be said, it does seem as though, and I'm not, deep in on this story, but it does feel like the tide has turned in that regard, right? Like, everyone seems to be shifting the other way now in terms of the reporters. It's fascinating time.
Here's a question for you, Joe. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
Do you think Vince McMahon is petty enough, and the people, his yes men around him, is petty enough to re-sign Adam Cole for X amount, lot of money, only to then beat him and beat him and beat him and beat him, and so he feels like he's making him worthless to any other company?
I mean,
I'll say one thing before you answer. Zelina Vega.
Right, so that's where I was going to go. I don't know if they'd do it as overtly as that, but like, look at even what they did with Gallows and Anderson, right? So they paid Gallows and Anderson like top stars without any intention to use them as top stars, just because they didn't want AEW to have them. Like, that's a real thing they did. And I do think they're kind of... I feel so bad for Zelina Vega because I completely get why people...
Do you think they lied to her?
I think that when she signed, she was going back to her husband.
Yeah.
So I get why people have fun with. Look, I'll be honest.
Do you think they knew when they convinced her to re-sign that they were going to release Aleister Black?
I would say no, but I think they were not in any intention of pushing either of them. And it is one of my favourite quotes of the year wrestling. As sad as it is, it's so funny to me that this is a real quote. Aleister Black goes, "Yeah, so anyway, they called me and I told my wife that I was fired, and she just burst into tears and I was laughing." And he said that himself, and it's like, Jesus. Well, that paints a picture, doesn't it? I mean, look, this be full disclosure. It isn't ideal that she did the whole unionisation thing and then just went back. It's not the best of looks. However, I feel a bit bad for when people poke fun because it's like, her husband worked there. She didn't know he was going to get fired. They may have, as you said, but it's just. And the thing is, in fairness, she is an example of it. If she was released tomorrow, AEW would sign her, but it wouldn't be nearly as big a deal, right? They have actually damaged her value. It's brutal, man. People don't realize how sinister that part of the business is. They can kill people's. Like my example recently has been those poor folks had to do retribution. Oh. No one even remembers they work there anymore. Like Dijakovic is on Raw, but no one cares. Mia Yim's not been seen. I know she was with Keith for a while, but I was
so deluded about retribution, mate, all the way through, right up until like a week before they finally broke up. I was still saying to Andrew on these shows, they could still do something with them. They could, because they're all so talented.
Right, yeah.
These stupid masks, you could still do something with. You could turn it around. I didn't think it was difficult to turn it around, especially with Ari at the helm, and like and like even I read that Mia Yim was supposed to debut on SmackDown last week or a couple of weeks ago, and then they cancelled it. Look at what they were doing with Keith Lee. I know he was out with obviously COVID and all that sort of complications, but like, mate, it's difficult, isn't it? Like they've got a 76-year-old man who's booking for people half his age. Like the viewers are half his age and younger. It's difficult for any 76-year-old to have his finger on the pulse for people half his age. I don't like the same things my teenage kids.
Right? Yeah,
you know what I mean.
No, you're absolutely right. I don't want to say concerns me because frankly I don't particularly care. Like they are what they are, right? They're really
gone past caring now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because the truth is they're going to make an insane amount of money regardless. So we have to almost leave our feelings at the door. If that makes sense, right? Because I never want to be the guy that. And look, this is what it is. But some people are going to come on these shows and get really fired up and talk about like justice is going to get them and they're going to close down. It's like that ain't really how it works, right? They're going to just keep making a lot of money, whether it's good or bad. It's a shame, but that's the truth right now. However, I have to say that to me anyway, I think it's very telling that the one thing that everyone likes on their shows, and I don't watch a lot of it, so this is just me looking in. Everyone likes the Roman stuff, which I think is pretty obviously the thing that they are like. The talent is clearly controlling most of that, right? Like it feels like Heyman and Roman are dictating almost all of it because you can see who they're against, you see who they're with. Like I would suggest, this is my hot take, I would suggest it's not great that the best thing on the show is the thing that Vince is probably controlling the least.
Well, that's it, mate, isn't it? And I'd take us back to the start of our conversation. The reason people liked the Bray Wyatt stuff was all those little Easter eggs and hints and the different promos and the way, not the stuff with Alexa, but the stuff that Bray Wyatt was in control of. Like, it says a lot that the stuff that the talent creatively are satisfied with and doing has got absolutely nothing to do with Vince and Bruce Pritchard and whoever else. Yeah. You mentioned Brock Lesnar. One of the biggest missed opportunities for me was Samoa Joe versus Brock back in the day. Like I really felt like they could have done something special. It was a good match, but they could have done something real special with Joe after that, and they didn't. That ship sailed with Joe, unfortunately. How do you see the Brock and Roman thing kind of playing out with Heyman? From what I saw last night, I've only seen clips. They seem to be like Heyman's playing the really shifty guy, and they don't know if they can trust him. For me, that feels like too obvious, too on the nose for Paul Heyman, like the way they did it last night. So if that's the case, that would probably mean that he's gonna sucker Brock in somehow and then turn on Brock. But they've never liked Brock without a mouthpiece. So
and more than just that, Brock doesn't. From what I recall, when Brock came back, he just wanted Heyman there just because he didn't want to have to talk. He was like, "Get Paul."
Yeah, so, he just stands there, mate. Well, he literally just stood there, didn't he, and has the occasional brawl.
So when I said this, people got very scared, but this is what I actually believe. I think he's going to work Roman either at this next pay-per-view or Saudi Arabia. I assume he's going to lose in some sort of shenanigans. And then my guess is he'll be drafted to Raw and they'll do what they've done for legitimately now about 5 of the last 6 years, which is they'll just put the Raw title on him and he'll beat Bobby and they'll be like, okay, and then they'll do their favourite thing.
They'll rematch them at WrestleMania, won't they?
Right, or they'll do the deal where they go, let's pick a babyface to beat Brock at WrestleMania. You know, that like they did it with Drew and they did it with Seth. That's what I think they'll end up doing because here's the thing with Brock. In terms of what Brock brings to the table, there's a lot to like. In their particular system, he has been such a crutch for them.
Yeah.
Because they just always put him in the same exact position. And that's why, if nothing else, I hope they get creative with Heyman. Because if Paul just gets put back with Brock and they just do the same acts, like, listen, mate, who could possibly care, right? Like, we've seen, they've done it for years now. I mean, mate, you just mentioned the Joe, that was 4 years ago.
Jesus Christ. Well, even like one of the things which really was like the final straw and turned me off Roman's previous run or gimmick was when they just did the Roman and Brock storyline to death. Yeah. And I just had no interest in it. I was so bored of Roman Reigns. I was in the way they pushed him, and it felt like every other guy was getting beaten by Roman in a feud to get him back to Brock all the time. And it was just so like you were just looking at it as a viewer and you're like, I don't want to watch this again. But they're beating Bray or they're beating Kevin Owens or they're beating Rollins because they want to go back to that. And I look at it and yes, I'm enjoying Roman Reigns' run at the moment. He is being particularly good. And of course, the natural storyline is to bring Brock into that. However, I also don't think that was the plan. I think the plan was Brock versus Bobby at Survivor Series, but they got wind of CM Punk and thought, okay, we do need less. And Vince is petty, let's be honest. He knew that if Brock came back and they had the show on the Saturday, the day after, it was going to take away at least a little bit from CM Punk. Because people say, oh, he's not that. He doesn't care that much about CM Punk. They fired him on his wedding day, for God's sake. Like they care, they don't like him, and they certainly don't want him helping another company get closer to them. I did
think it was very interesting that like Roman was obviously having some fun, right? When he took a shot at Punk in that interview, like
people take it way too seriously.
But with that in mind, I will say it was very interesting. I would have recommended against framing Punk again as like the anti-WWE guy, because as soon as he said that interview, the fan base that was waiting for Punk in Chicago and was waiting for him in all these towns went
way more rabid.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, we'll show him." And that's the one thing sometimes is they kind of poke that fan a little much. So, like, I think Roman was just having fun, but Roman probably doesn't realize how much the Punk audience resents him.
Yeah, well, that's it. They're the same people who like support Punk and watch that run before he left. That was exactly the time when Roman was being started to be like really forced upon people as a viewer. And I think a lot of people do kind of coincide the two of Punk leaving, not because he left because of Roman, but they happened at the same time, would be my point. And I think that's an issue. What I want to finish up on, mate, and I'd love that we've literally just jumped from thing to thing and it's all over the place. All my shows are. That's why, that's why I just, all my shows are all over the place and upside down and jump around. That's what we do. That's why Sky Sports haven't called yet, mate. I think it's because they've got no structure. No structure.
I can relate. Don't worry, I've got you on that.
No structure. Becky Lynch is going to be the top heel on SmackDown then, apparently, mate. Apart from Roman. Wow. What can you say?
I don't know where to go with this. I get
do they
it.
not learn their lessons? Like,
know,
they tried to force her as a heel last time and nearly caused a revolt against the company.
This is where I go back to that phrase I said earlier about like not trying not to care. But I'm legitimately proud of myself when I read stories like that, and I just go,
yeah.
It means I've defeated them.
Is it that you've defeated it, or is it that they've defeated you? Like
both.
They've beaten you they've beaten you into submission. Now
it's 100% that. Yes,
it's like, well, they're going to do it anyway, so why should I?
So I guess what I'm saying is
I know what you mean. Though, for your own health,
right? Yeah. So I've left.
Yeah,
checked out, mate. Live somewhere else. But Becky, look, let's be honest, objectively, the stuff with Bianca at SummerSlam was terrible. Why do it? I don't know.
Made no sense, mate. They didn't have to do it.
Right, I'm fascinated by what their plan is, because I assume they're not going to everyone wanted this to be the WrestleMania match, and we're in August, so good luck.
You're not going to drag it out for that. They can't drag feuds out that long. They're not capable.
So what do you think the plan is? Like, are they going to just do the match at the September show? And
I wouldn't be surprised if Bianca gets screwed out of it somehow. Whether it's maybe Becky screws her, and that's how they try and force her as a heel. I mean, one way you could do it is have like a multi-woman ladder match for the number one contender, and have Becky sat at the commentary desk doing, commentating, and then Bianca, everyone's down, Bianca's going up, she's going to get the shot, and then Becky comes and pushes the ladder over. That might turn people against her, but I do think that action will get her booed, but she will have to change. If she legitimately wants to be a heel, she has to go away from the kind of Conor McGregor type persona, because as many people who hate Conor McGregor, there's double that who love him, and they love the fact that he doesn't give a shit, and he says all this wild stuff, and he's game for a fight. Like, people love that, and they relate to it to a certain degree, and I think she has to go away from that. Like, she has to look at what Seth does. Like, Seth started his heel run by being monotonous and monotone because he knew it was annoying people. Because if he hadn't done that, he was really over. So people wouldn't have booed and stuff like that. So he had to start it with that, and then he's got to where he is now. Like, she has to find her version of that. And that could start with an action, like I say, but it's got to be followed up with a change in promo. For me,
it's interesting because the end, when you try and make a red hot heel, the only real business...
mate. The one thing I'd add is the one advantage they've got this time over the last time is last time she was against Charlotte.
Yes.
She's not naturally popular to the viewer, whereas Bianca Belair, people universally seem to like her, and they want to see her be at the top. So there's a slight difference, isn't there?
As long as you come out of it with her, not just back to where she was before SummerSlam, but somehow you make her seem better than she was. I mean, which would be a feat. She lost in 20 seconds, but she's going to have to win multiple times clean against Becky. Yeah. I guess it's worthwhile. But to me, it's also, did she need any of this? Could you not have just had Becky and Bianca both as top baby faces?
If you were gonna, that's it, isn't it? You could have just done it. But if you were insistent that it was going to be 20 seconds, and you're insistent that Becky's going to be heel, I don't understand why when they shook hands, why they didn't then back off to start, and just before the bell gets run, you have Becky hit her with a title or like a chair or something which is a genuinely heel action, and then it also explains the losing in 20 seconds to a rock bottom because you've been hit with a chair. Do you know what I mean?
No, and absolutely.
These little details are the things where you just think, not only does it not make sense, and that's frustrating, but it feels lazy. And that's, I've checked out. The last draw for me, checking out completely in terms of Raw, was Bray Wyatt's release, because that was the one thing each week which I look forward to seeing if there was a segment with. And then there's other stuff I enjoy. I enjoyed the Hurt Business. They're broken up.
That was a big one. Yeah, that's ending that
without
stuff like
that. It just
it kills people, man. It kills their own motivation to watch it. It's actually very sad that they take stuff he'll enjoy and just actively just cut out.
I've watched WWE week in, week out since I was 16. I'm 40 in November, right? Or actually before I was 16, 13, because my neighbour used to tape it on Sky Sports for me. Going back, because I show my age, on cassettes and stuff.
Right.
And so you're talking what's that? 25, 30 years of my life that I've watched this week in, week out. And there was weeks and days. I wouldn't miss a second. I would wake up on a Tuesday morning and watch Raw from start to finish. The last 6 weeks, I've watched Raw through YouTube clips because I don't want to dedicate 2 hours and 40 minutes of my time because I just don't feel like I get a reward for it. If anything, I get insulted. My intelligence insulted. And I think I watch SmackDown because I enjoy it. I watch AEW because I enjoy it. I watch Impact. With Impact, I'll tend to watch some, and if I know something's on, or when I know when I knew Omega was on it, I'd watch it and stuff like that. But I don't watch it religiously. But Raw is clips now.
It's very, I mean, it's common, man. I'm the same. I mean, I barely do the clips. They run you off eventually. It's a shame. It shouldn't be that way, but it is, right?
Oh, yes. Right then, my friend, it's a Saturday night, and I promised my wife I would not do podcasts on a Saturday night, but I made a special dispensation this week. Unfortunately, Andrew wasn't able to join us. I am truly disappointed about that, but we'll get together, the three of us, soon. We won't leave it 2 years this next time, mate. Because look, I could sit here legitimately for the next 2 hours and just go from subject to subject to subject, and it's just the way it is. But yeah, are you looking forward to that NWA women's show?
Looking forward to strong phrase. I'm supposed to review it, so I should probably watch it.
Can't watch the clips.
I don't know. I'm so out of the loop with all that stuff. Like, I'll watch it. I'm sure it'll be fine, but I'm not.
I just don't have the time to watch it, mate.
Right.
And like, it's not the same as what it was a year before the pandemic, is it?
No, not at all. No, I agree. I'm NWA. I haven't watched like an episode of since it came back. I used to like it a lot too. But that's, they was one of probably the biggest victim, and some of it was their own, internal issues. But
yeah. Last thing I was going to ask you, sorry, mate. Bryan Danielson. What would you do with him?
I upset everyone when I say this, but it's my instincts, okay? I just think he comes in, he goes face to face with Omega at All Out, and you do that match at Arthur Ashe Stadium. I know the rankings, everyone gets very upset. Bryan is unique. He's not someone that you need to do a big year story arc with. Just book the dream match and let people have fun with it. And then, as silly as it sounds, he can work backwards, because Bryan's going to want to wrestle everyone. He's not like, Punk's a big match guy, you make him an attraction. Let Bryan start at the top, and then he can just get stuck in and figure out where you like. He's such a huge deal, and people just are missing it, because I understand he isn't like a blockbuster celebrity. He's not his personality, but he's such a great pro wrestler.
That's it, isn't it? He's a legitimately proper celebrity in America, and people underestimate things like Total Divas and stuff like that. Like, he can't walk down the street and go and get milk in the shop. And I think people miss that, but because Punk's come in, that's almost taken away from the magnitude of, like, Bryan Danielson turned down his contract extension with WWE and has just quietly moved on. Like, he was in main events. He had a title not long ago. Like,
WrestleMania main event, man.
It's remarkable. And we'll finish on this, I think, and I'll get your take on it. Like, it's remarkable that AEW, with all the momentum that they had anyway, are now potentially bringing in CM Punk, followed by Bryan Danielson, followed by Adam Cole, followed by Bray Wyatt, maybe with Braun Strowman. Like, to me, and maybe I'm, like, because I'm out of the loop, it wouldn't surprise me if, August, it wouldn't surprise me if by this time next year, Dynamite was hitting 2 million. It wouldn't, because just those four names alone are huge names, which people, and they all have their individual fan bases who will follow them. Like, it's these guys who, you've got guys who've got a lot of followers and stuff like that, but how much of it is like just WWE fans who follow the superstars? Like, Bray Wyatt has got millions of fans, literally, who will, wherever he goes, they'll go. Same as Bryan and Punk and Adam Cole as well, I think, to a certain extent.
I agree. I think it's something we haven't seen since the mid-90s, right? Especially if you just isolate to Punk and Bryan, it is very reminiscent of the Outsiders. Now, it's different. I understand the circumstances are different. Like, there's a million and one different variables. But it still is reminiscent. There's nothing like that since then, right? It's been 25 years.
Yeah, and I think in terms of name value, you could argue that they're at the same level in terms of the importance and things like that. And people try and say, like, WWE didn't want CM Punk. If CM Punk had reached out to them during that backstage run and said, I want to come back, they would have jumped at the chance.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
if Daniel Bryan wanted to sign a new contract, they would jump to the chance. And that's what it is. Maybe I'm being unrealistic, but I do think they could hit 2 million.
Right.
And the thing which they've got on their side is faith. I have faith that they will book all those guys in good, important storylines and make them like superstars. And like out of the 4, you feel like each of them will have a plan. Like you could see Bray Wyatt coming in with some vignettes or something.
Mm-hmm.
You could see Adam Cole coming in, and you think he's going to help Hangman, and he turns against them, and then they retell to a certain extent the friction between Cole and Omega, because that never got a payoff.
Right.
That's there. They got so much footage as well from BTE and stuff like that. It's fascinating, mate. Right. Guy, I'm rubbish at ending shows, me. See, I keep going and going and going. Joe, look, mate, it's been phenomenal to chat to you. I really enjoyed it, and like I say, we'll as soon as Andrew's schedule opens up a bit in a couple of weeks or whatever, we'll get you back on. But I appreciate your time.
It was a pleasure, man. I mean, I'm glad to wrestling. It's a shame Andrew ducked me again, but as you said, we'll do it again sometime soon. It's
scared of you, mate. Scared of you.
We'll settle that at some point, but no, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, man. It's good.
Tell people where they can get distraction and stuff.
Man, at this point, it's out of hand, right? As you can probably tell. Just follow me on Twitter at Joe Hulbert, and you'll find like there's Patreon, there's Twitch, there's the YouTube show. It all comes on the Twitter eventually. There is a lot of stuff you have to go through along the way to get the plugs, but that's part of the experience. But yeah, no, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
Top man. Guys, subscribe, youtube.com/AcePodcastNation, and of course, if you want the audio stuff, Sports Social, and check out the Keepin It Real website. But it's been a pleasure. Cheers. We'll see you next time.
I've been all in my bag. You been all in my business. You be all in your feelings. I've been all in them trenches.